Got to read between the lines. Got to read between the lines.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we're very thankful you take the time from your busy day to join us. My friends, we have actually some good news to present to you this week. A plethora of negative news, but I thought that we would join in celebrating some victories that have taken place for the people of this country. And one of the first things is that Montana actually is requiring search warrants now for cell phone location tracking. Now, if you don't know what I mean, I know we got into this some years ago about how they can use your cell phones to triangulate and to track you. And you can say, well, I'll just turn them off and everything will be fine, but that's not the case. They're still not only recording all of your conversations, they're not only recording all of the transmissions that you've made to who, where, and what time and so forth, but they can actually locate you physically where you are. And the science is quite astounding, but of course, once it's in the hands of authorities, it gets used into a negative way. And I thought this was really interesting. And it's Montana becomes first state to require search warrants for cell phone location tracking. Now, my friends, this doesn't mean that they're no longer going to be listening to you. This doesn't mean they're no longer going to be recording all your conversations, the who, what's, and where's. This just means that when they want to track you, which, by the way, they do 24/7, they're actually supposedly going to have to get a search warrant in the state of Montana. And I find this exciting because, my friends, the Montana, first there was a judge that said they need to do this, but now there is a bill in front of the state legislature, actually, and it looks like it's going to pass. I don't want to make predictions, but there's a lot of support for this bill where that if you are a citizen of Montana, and the federal government and or the state government and or the private entities that are doing this for the federal government wish to track your location, they are now going to have to get a warrant. Now, the way the warrant process is, I'm not foolish enough to believe that they're actually looking at evidence and so forth. It's pretty much a stamped process by these corporate magistrates that we call judges. But I do look at this as a step in the right direction. It's just like, you know, they get their foot in the door to bring in all these abusive and authoritarian measures. Well, I think for once the people got their foot in the door, and we are having some effect. Now, my friends, this was actually presented to the courts by a group of citizens in Montana, which makes it even more exciting because we can have effect. The last thing, as we've talked about, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Henry Kissinger, and others, Rockefellers and so forth, the Rothschilds have all said that their biggest fear is you waking up and you getting off the couch and you getting together as one entity and putting all this energy into a positive use. And to expose them, to educate your fellow man and woman and friend and family about what is actually taking place. So this is a real victory. And I also believe, from what I'm reading, there was some links to the site, is that you're going to see other states go on with this. Some states that now are looking to do this. California had its chance, but of course the legislature shot it down. And then the Governor Jerry Brown also vetoed it when it passed the House. But the federal legislation, if you want to look at the act, is called the Geolocational Privacy and Surveillance Act. And it was recently introduced in Congress. Now, it's still in committee, okay? But it looks like it's going to pass committee and get actually to the non-representing representatives, as we call them. But you know, folks, if you want to do something about this, write your local representatives, call them, Email them. Let them know, hey, take a look at this Geolocational Privacy and Surveillance Act. My friends, notice this isn't just Geolocational Privacy and Surveillance Act in the United States. This is the worldwide. You know, as I talked to you in the last show, somebody, a friend of mine, Eric, said to me, Tom, why aren't you jumping off the ceiling? When I heard about this, I figured you'd be jumping off the ceiling about the NSA spying on us and recording everything, you know, our energy use, our traveling, our eating, everything is being recorded, my friends. We talked about General Petrakis just recently, who come out and said we are spying on the American people through their appliances. And he talked about dishwashers and refrigerators and televisions and so forth, cell phones and everything. That's what these smart meters are about, my friends. These smart meters that they're promoting to you and giving to you with no cost, that should be a big red flag to you, is so they can look into every aspect of your life, your energy use. And also with them smart meters, my friends, they can control your heat. You like your heat at 68 degrees? Well, let's say they pass something, or they just create the statute that says, well, your heat's not going to be above 60. You're not going to have the option of turning your heat up at 8 degrees. It's going to be controlled through these smart meters. So anyway, I thought that was a real victory for the people. In the state of Maine, there is also a bill, a privacy bill, that has actually got the approval, verbal approval from the governor. The state of Texas legislators also looked at a bill. Unfortunately, it was shot down. But what I'm saying here is that the ball is rolling. We have got our foot in the door on that. And I think that's a real positive thing for you to understand, that we can have effect. You're not going to have effect from saying, oh, there's nothing we can do. You have got to educate yourselves. You have got to understand the who, the what, and the wheres. You've got to understand that this is just a puppet, the puppet show, the dog and pony show that we're allowed to see and understand, to look up at the string holders and who is actually controlling the strings of the puppets and the dog and pony show and that you view every day on your television. Some more good news. Cincinnati judge orders all speed cameras confiscated, and then they didn't do it, and the manufacturer was held in contempt. Very interesting. This is from July 6th, and traffic cameras have been part of life, this is the article, part of life of the urban scenery now for years. But in Elmwood Place, a suburban of Cincinnati, they are history. In a recent court hearing, Judge Robert Ruhlman ordered them not only to be shut off, but to be impounded and taken off the streets permanently. The ruling comes as a result of a contentious legal battle over the speed cameras. Both sides of the case were back in court before Ruhlman during a contempt hearing on June 27th, where that judgment that the Elmwood Place and the speeding cameras contractor Opto Traffic were in contempt of court for not removing the cameras as ordered, reported WLWT. Ruhlman found in March that the speed cameras were completely unconstitutional, essentially then ordering them shut down along with the speed ticket program. He also ruled that outstanding tickets issued as a result of the system did not have to be paid. During the June 27th hearing, Ruhlman found that his order had been violated in a number of ways. First off, the cameras had been turned back on, though the Elmwood Place Police Chief Peskin said during the hearing that they were only used to collect traffic and speed data and not to collect license plate information or to issue new traffic tickets. Well, first of all, my friends, take a look at what they're telling you. They're not just issuing traffic tickets, but they're collecting license plates, data, and information. This is, they know when you're coming, where you're going, at the time of day, the time of evening, and everything. And believe me, this all goes into this portfolio that they have on every single American. As we talked about this some years ago with Echelon and other programs, COINTELPRO and so forth, where they have built a portfolio on everybody. Financial, educational, medical, and now the IRS is going to get involved in your medical, are just unbelievable. Unbelievable. So understand what this police chief is admitting to you. He doesn't really understand what he's admitting to you. He's trying to stick up for the fact that, well, they weren't giving out traffic tickets anymore. No, but they're collecting all this data. The chief also testified that people who had come to the station to pay the tickets that had been issued were told they didn't have to. Many people did show up trying to pay their citation to us, and we told them that the program was to be suspended and didn't have to pay the citation. The thing is, tickets were never meant to be paid to the suburb, though some monies apparently were collected, with some going back to Elmwood Place, according to court testimony. The traffic camera company collected the citations and apparently continued to collect money sent in after the judge's March order. The testimony in the court was at $48,000 was collected, with a small percentage of that money passed on to the village per the speed camera contract. Oppo Traffic did not have a representative in court Thursday. Now, friends, understand what they're saying here. This is like the private prisons companies that have taken over the prisons, where they actually have quotas that they have to maintain with these prisons a certain prison population. Okay? It's not about just us. It is about maintaining the relationship, the profit margins with these corporations. As I've said to you many a time on this program, that we are in a state of fascism. And fascism, as Benito Mussolini said, is pure corporatism. And the thing that makes us different from Nazi Germany in the 30s and 40s to America, the United States today, is that in Nazi Germany, the state, the government, took over the corporations. Here in the United States, the corporations have taken over the government, particularly through the issuance of the currency and the control of the money system, or lack of money system, here in the United States. And I say that if you're a new viewer, because we have taken out our Black's Law Dictionary and on this program many a time, and we have demonstrated to you that we do not have money. Why? Because money does not encompass debt. Federal Reserve note, Federal Reserve private for-profit banking corporation, and what is a note? An acknowledgement of debt. So we do not actually have money. But what has taken place is that the Federal Reserve, being at the top and then through all these subordinate corporations, has taken over every aspect of our society, whether it be education, whether it be medical, whether it be infrastructure. Do you remember that we wrote a couple of years ago about the executive order that actually gave them permission to collateralize all of the infrastructure in this company, and they were selling it to Spanish companies and Chinese companies and so forth? We talked about the Chinese economic zones being developed in this country. There was 55 of them currently. Okay? So these corporations, even the prison system, they've taken it over. And they have to keep a certain quota of percentage of prisoners in that facility, so you, number one, can serve the time, and so also through these corporations can make their profit margins that are guaranteed through these contracts. It's very simple. I'm not saying it's right, but it's very simple. And what they're saying here in this article is that the $48,000 that were collected after the judge said, no, you're not to do this, okay, a small percentage of that money was passed on to the village per the speed camera contract. So folks, who's getting your, you think your speeding tickets are going to help do the roads and so forth? No, these private corporations are getting the money. Okay? And then who paid to have the cameras put up and purchase the cameras? Your tax money. As I say time and time and time again, we are financing our own demise, and we're doing it in multiple ways. We're doing it through ignorance, and we're doing it through being apathetic. But we're doing it nonetheless. And this is why I say to you that, you know, we have to get active. And you can have results like this and like this. You know, Montana and Ohio here saying, you know, no more. No more. And you know, and maybe George Bush was right. Maybe the Constitution is just a GD piece of paper. Because if you don't know your rights, my friends, you don't have any. And how many of you out there, now I know some of the viewers of this program are very educational and have done their diligent research. I'm talking about the average American. They could not tell you anything about the Constitution. Anything. And if you don't know the rights, you don't have them. Now, one of the citizens, Mike Allen, who is an attorney, who is part of the legal team that fought against the cameras, called this a corporate money grab. This offends me as a citizen. It offends me as a lawyer. It offends me on behalf of my clients, Allen said, according to the reports. In order to ensure that no further violations of his order occurred, the judge ruled the Hamilton County Sheriff to impound the traffic cameras and all the equipment that is part of the traffic program and store it at the expense of the Elmwood place. The equipment is to be released when the $48,000 in improperly collected tickets fees is returned justly to the people. Wow, this judge is awesome. Now, this judge knows a little bit about the Constitution, doesn't he? And I think he took it a personal affront that this company and Elmwood Place continue to do what they did. We are going to do everything in our power to get some money back in the people's pockets because is it not right, said Mike Allen. This is, by the way, my friends, the report is a result of a class action lawsuit brought together sometime, which had to get through all the courts. So class action means what? Multiple people, more than 3 entities got together, got off the couch, educated themselves, and proceeded with the avenues that are available to us to win the battle. That's having cause and effect. And that is the very last thing the string holders who control the puppets that we're allowed to see every day want. And they fear it. They fear it. You know, they have drilled into us that we have no power. We have power. And this is what's so vital with regards to getting educated and getting off the couch. And just, you know, as Nancy Reagan said, even though the government was bringing all the drugs, just say no. Do not cooperate no more. Anyway, thought that would be some uplifting news and some good news for us. Let's continue. This article was written by Paul Joseph Watson. And the headline reads, Police and firefighters ordered not to speak about Michael Hastings' crash. Now, my friends, the more research I do on Michael Hastings, the more I have speculation that he was murdered. Now, I say this because of the forensics of the crash. I say this because of how he spoke to family and friends prior. But now there is a gag order issued to the police and firefighters. And the LAPD refused to release the police report. Very interesting. And I will tell you right now that Michael Hastings, if you do not know what I'm talking about, he was a Rolling Stone journalist that was really awake to what was going on. And he was about to break, as he said, the biggest CIA story ever to hit the papers. Of course, he did a lot of work with Julian Assange and so forth, and brought forth had a lot of courage. This man had courage. And anyway, he was being followed, he was being tracked, he was in fear for his life and his family's life. He had spoken to many of his friends about it, including a Sergeant Biggs. And if you get on the internet and punch in, please listen to his interview that was done by the site InfoWars with him. It was very, very foretelling, basically, that Michael Hastings was in fear for his life. He knew that the government was coming down on him, and he wanted to release the CIA report that he was about to bring forth. But he was tied up, literally trying to go underground, if you would. he was in fear for his life and his family. And so a very, very tragic event. Do I think that the truth is going to come out on that whole thing? Well, if it does, it will only be by the efforts of private citizens, family, friends, private citizens, and not any government entity, because the government entity has given the gag order and they are not releasing any information. Okay, we had talked about a little bit about this before, about a year ago, and I told you at one point that all wars are a settlement of debt. All wars are bankers' wars. They have to sell it to you in one method or another, you know, weapons of mass destruction, 9/11, however, whatever Hegelian dialectic, however they want to play into that whole thing. But do you remember about 3 years ago, we talked to you about the time that France actually sent its fleet, this was in 1954, actually sent its fleet to New York to collect its gold. Well, interesting enough, and it did, it was successful, but it had to do it by the show of force. And then about a year ago, we talked to you about how a lot of countries no longer trust the Federal Reserve holding their gold, and so they want their gold back. Well, interesting article by a gentleman by the name of Michael Rivera, who is a very deep researcher, and the title goes like this: Game over. It's all a farce. The Fed German gold is gone. Today, one of the savviest and well-connected hedge funds managers in the world shocked the King World News by taking us once again on a trip down the rabbit hole that was nothing short of breathtaking. Outspoken Hong Kong hedge fund manager William Kaye, and that's K-A-Y-E, spoke with KWN about the missing Fed German gold, where it has gone, and how much of the People's Bank of China really owns. My friends, when World War III begins, they're going to sell it for different ways. This is going to be the cause of it. This and the currency wars that are going on. In this interview, given to stunned readers around the world, Kaye, who 25 years ago worked for Goldman Sachs in mergers and acquisitions, and also ran money for George Soros, had this to say in part one of his remarkable interview. Now, this is Mr. Kaye speaking. Global hegemony, leadership or dominance, is changing in a way that most people don't fully comprehend. This area of the world, the Asia-Pacific, China in particular, is positioning itself to be the leading global power as we look out over the next 5 years. Now, my friends, they are not positioning themselves. The bankers are positioning China, because the bankers want this rigid, subordinate, dominated society by government. They don't want a free enterprise, laissez-faire economy like we used to have, particularly after the Civil War up until 1913, which was, by the way, the most productive era in this country's history, because the private bankers did not have control of our money system. So I will disagree with Mr. Kaye on this, that China's setting itself up for it. No. China is being set up. As a matter of fact, you know who financed them being set up? You did. You financed it. NAFTA, CAFTA, GATT. Folks, the GM bailout, all these bailouts, you didn't bail anybody out. All you merely did was pay for the transfer of equipment, machinery, and logistics to go to China and South America and Vietnam and Thailand. You didn't bail them out. You just paid for the move. That's all. They got all these tax incentives to move their manufacturing base overseas. And all your non-representing representatives signed off on it. Why? Because, well, they made a lot of money also. They took major profits from this. So understand, China's not setting itself up. The bankers have set China up. That's the society they want in the world. Let us continue. My sources tell me that contrary to public numbers, China has roughly 8,000 tons of physical gold. They are not only the world's largest holder of gold, but currently they are the largest importer of gold in the world. Now, why would China be after gold like this? I'm going to tell you why. And a lot of you already know the answer, don't you? It is because when these paper fiat currencies falter and crash, like history has shown to us so many times, that it comes back to intrinsic value. Intrinsic value. And my friends, look who was behind all this. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs. Okay? But when you go through this article, what really happens is the gold winds up in places like Beijing, Switzerland, and Israel. Okay? The People's Bank of China certified that gold, we've got gold available that we can deliver. We melt it down, we've tested it, and it may have had the Bunstick Bank symbol on it when it arrived, but now it's melted down to 9995 fine gold. Okay? So my friends, these bankers that are receiving the $85 billion a month currently through the quantitative easing, all right, they are liquidating any physical asset in this country, including the gold, including the infrastructure of this country, including your freedom as they put you in prison to these foreign holding private corporations. Okay? Really incredible. Really, really incredible. Michael Rivera, as I was on his website, also did another article, which I don't have a lot of time to get into the whole thing, but I found it interesting. It was the return of COINTELPRO. Okay? You know, and COINTELPRO was counterintelligence programs, and we've done a whole show on this some time ago, and it all came to life, in 1976 on a Senate report, and it was about COINTELPRO, and then of course they got into it more with the Church hearings, and that was Frank Church. But what they discovered was that the FBI and the CIA were actually had this program of domestic intelligence and counterintelligence and mind control program against the American people. All right? Now, then when you get into this article with the FBI, it says that just from the period of 1956 to 1971, over 20,000 Americans were investigated by the FBI. Now, listen to this, based on their political views and beliefs. Most were never suspected of actually having committed a crime. The 1976 Senate report was that the FBI had the duty to do whatever is necessary to combat perceived threats to political order. Are you listening to me? Not perceived threats to your safety, not perceived threats to the Constitution of the United States, but perceived threats to the political order. This is from the 1976 Senate report. The fact is that the perceived threats were usually American citizens engaging in constitutionally protected behavior was apparently overlooked. The COINTELPRO was to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize any group or individual that was deemed to subvert or a threat to the established power and political structure. Folks, I am reading this verbatim from the 1976 Senate report. The FBI's techniques were often extreme, with the agency being complicit in the murder and assassination of political dissidents, or having people sent away to prison for life. Some of the more moderate actions that were used were blackmail, spreading false rumors, intimidation, and harassment. It has been argued that the U.S. is unique in that is the only Western industrialized democracy, we're a republic, to have engaged in such widespread and well-organized domestic surveillance program. Oh, now they're calling it a domestic surveillance program. It finally came to an end when it was threatened with public exposure. That's when the church hearings came into play. But in a stunning revelation by the Partnership for Civil Justice Fund, it appears that COINTELPRO is currently alive and well. Through a Freedom of Information Act request, the PCJF, was able to obtain documents showing how the FBI was treating the Occupy Wall Street movement from its inception as a potential criminal and domestic terrorist threat. This despite the FBI's own acknowledgement that the OWS organizers themselves planned on engaging in peaceful and popular protests and did not condone the use of violence. Another document filed gave a clear picture of how the FBI was using its officers and agents across the country as early as August of 2011 to engage in a massive surveillance scheme against the OWS. This was almost a month before any actual protests took place or encampments were set up. Imagine that. Imagine that. This was before they were even organized. Just because, what's that tell you? They already, these people who organized this were already on the list of the FBI. They were already in their life, if you would, the FBI was. The FBI documents show that the government agency had considered all planned protests and individuals involved as potential terrorist threats. We got this big terrorist threat, guys. Most disturbing of all, on page 61, of the government being ready to engage in sniper attacks against protesters in New York City and Houston, Texas, if deemed necessary. This needing to formulate a plan to kill the leadership of the protest groups via suppressed sniper rifles. Folks, this is an FBI document. This is an FBI document. No judge, no jury, not even a charge of a crime. We're just going to eliminate you. So who are the real terrorists here? Intimidation, false rumors, harassment, blackmail. Who are the real terrorists? I'm going to stop here because this also gets into some other things, but I'm running out of time, as I always do. But I want to leave you with a quote from Judge Damon J. Keith. Democracies die behind closed doors. That's where we are. You have got to look up at the string holders. Okay, I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to be able to get into this the way I want to, but I want you to listen to this. Former judge admits flaws in secret court. First of all, is this what this country is about? Secret courts. A former federal judge who served on the secret court overseeing the National Security Agency's secret surveillance programs of Americans said Tuesday that the panel is independent but flawed because only the government side is represented. Let me read that again. A former federal judge who served on the secret court overseeing the National Security Agency's secret surveillance programs of Americans said Tuesday the panel is independent but flawed because only the government side is represented. Anyone who has been a judge will tell you a judge needs to hear both sides of a case, said James Robinson, a former federal district judge based in Washington, who served on the secret Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act courts. You know them as FISA courts. He served between 2002 and 2005. Robinson spoke during a Tuesday hearing of a federal oversight board directed by President Barack Obama to scrutinize government spying. Oh, really? Robinson questioned whether the secret FISA court should provide overall legal approval for the surveillance program, saying the court has turned into something like an administrative agency. My friends, all of these courts are pure administrative agencies. All of them, at every level. He is one of several judges with FISA experience who have spoken out recently to affirm the court's independence. Is that what this is about? Are courts supposed to be secret and independent? No. They're supposed to be open to the public and interdependent on the relationship with us. Folks, this article is very disrupting. disruptive, excuse me. And he goes on to say, basically here, that this is nothing but, again, a dog and pony show. These are administrative courts, an administrative agency, to use his words. This isn't about just us. It's about just us. Not just this, just us. This is how the game is played. And of course, now then they're going to get into this evil Mr. Snowden after he exposed all this and brought it to light in June. Now they're going to have a Privacy and Civil Liberties Board to lead a national conversation about the secret programs. Really? And you believe that? And what's the conversation? The conversation is going to be, hey, how can we wrap this up and keep this from the American people and not have this exposure? That's what the conversation is going to be about. My friends, again, secret courts. Secret courts. Is that what we are about as a people, as a government, as an institution of society, guiding society? Secret courts? Secret judges with only the government's side as representative? I thought that was Nazi Germany. I thought that was Stalin and Lenin and Pol Pot and Mao Zedong. Oh, that's right. We financed all them people I just mentioned. That's right. Here's another headline written by Mr. Watson. Obama now global head of Al-Qaeda, or as we know it to be, Al-Qaeda. Now, I do not have the time to go into this entire article, but I will sum it up real quick by saying that, folks, as we've talked about before and given proof on, we founded and we still continue to fund Al-Qaeda. Hamas was founded and still continued and funded by the Mossad. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded and still continued to be funded by MI6 and MI5 out of England. It's called it's when they have control of the opposition, and they use it with the Hegelian dialectic. Crisis, reaction, solution. Create the crisis. Get the reaction from the people. And the most effective one being fear or anger, but mostly fear, and then bring in the solution, which always strengthens their authority and their purse strings and limits your liberties. Okay? But in this very in-depth article, and perhaps another show we will get into this in more depth, we're just going to do, Ben, real quick here. Since it's now been established that those merely suspected of engaging in terrorism, including U.S. citizens, are subject to targeted drone strikes anywhere in the world, including the United States, under these terms of his own prosecution of the fake war on terror, Obama must immediately order a drone strike on the White House because the facts document below incontrovertibly demonstrate that it represents the headquarters of Al-Qaeda operations worldwide. Of course, Mr. Watson's being a little sarcastic here, but let's continue real quick. The fact that Al-Qaeda was created by Western intelligence and has always been controlled by these interests demonstrates that Al-Qaeda's threat is one of the greatest ongoing hoaxes in world history. This administration has spent nearly $500 million and is now using U.S. Special Forces to train militants in Syria who have pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda and who continue to carry out grisly beheadings, terrorist bombings, targeting innocent civilians, and chemical weapons attacks against women and children. These are the same militants backed not only by the United States, but by every major NATO power have repeatedly voiced their hatred for and intention to destroy America, as they have ransacked Christian churches, burned U.S. flags, chanted anti-American slogans, and sang praises to Osama bin Laden while glorifying the 9/11 attacks. My friends, Osama bin Laden was a CIA asset. We know that, okay? And at some other show, I'm going to get into this in really good depth, but I don't have the time because the main topic I wanted to talk about today, and I'm low on time, was 11 reasons why the Federal Reserve should be abolished. Now, Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution says that the Congress is supposed to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of coin, and fix the standard weights and measures. Well, if you've been watching this program, you understand quite well the Federal Reserve is a private foreign for-profit banking corporation. It has no allegiance to the United States. It has no subserviency to the United States Congress and or any official of the United States government. As a matter of fact, it is the credit holder of an insolvent corporation. Federal Reserve is in a superior position to the United States government because the United States government, being a corporation formed by the Organic Act of 1871, which we have read to you verbatim, is insolvent to the corporation of the Federal Reserve Bank. Okay? Now, the Federal Reserve, and I have written to every one of my representatives, my senators, my non-representing representatives. I have even spoken to my local state representative about this, and nobody wants to touch this, nobody at all. But the lease that was granted by, well, I won't say the Congress, because the Federal Reserve Act was put into play on December 23rd, 1913, while the Congress was away for the Christmas holiday break. True, look it up. We've read this to you verbatim before from the congressional record. Okay, but their lease was a 100-year lease. That lease expires on December 22nd, 2013, not too far away. Nobody wants to touch this. Even people that I look to for information, they don't want to touch it. This is a powder keg right here, because the Federal Reserve knows that the average American knew what they've done to this country, how they've destroyed it, and that guess what? We have to renew the lease to do business with them again in about 5 months. What do you think the reaction of the people would be? First of all, you've got to get the ignorant American people to understand the Federal Reserve is not a federal entity. And when I say the word federal, I mean as the assumption to be within the request of the United States government. As a matter of fact, my friends, Paul Warburg out of Germany put that name in deceitfully. He said, we want to make the American people, two things. One, believe that it's part of the federal government, so we're going to put the word federal in there. And number two, we know we're going to confiscate all the intrinsic value and wealth of this nation because we're going to bleed it. And when we do that, we're going to take all the gold and silver, and we want the people to think that we're going to put it in a reserve for them somewhere for the good of the country. That's how they come up with the name. Read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and you will see that. Okay, let's talk about the Federal Reserve. The greatest economic period of growth, and I think I had just mentioned this, believe it or not, my friends, was post-Civil War in 1913. And guys, that was the only time that the Federal Reserve, the private bankers, because believe it or not, this is our third private bank to control the currency and the issuance of our currency to the in the history of the United States. Do you remember Amschel Rothschild's quote, "Give me control of a nation's currency. I care not who makes its laws." Why? I'm going to control everything. You know, it's like when we get back into this raising the debt ceiling. Well, my friends, guess what? If you're the creditor and I'm the debtor, do I have any say at all in raising the debt ceiling? No, I'm at your bequest. I'm on my knees to you. You, as the creditor, have to raise the debt ceiling. I have no say. I'm the debtor. I have to come to you. I have to walk into your bank, your facility, your home, whichever it may be, get on my knees and say, hey, to keep this scam going, I need more credit because I'm completely in debt. Even the medium of exchange that my shareholders / citizens are using is your debt instrument because we don't have dollars anymore. Remember, we read the coinage, all 4 coinage acts from this country to you. We read it verbatim. What was a dollar? A dollar was 25.8 grains of gold and a 15-to-1 ratio of silver. Do we have gold and silver backing our money no more? No, we do not. Hence, we do not have money. We have Federal Reserve notes. What's a note? Acknowledgement of debt. That's why there's 2 signatories, my friends. One's the creditor, one's the debtor. We've got into that on other programs. We went over all the symbology. Remember I asked you, hey, what does the Egyptian pyramids have to do with American history? 0. Why is it on there? Because it has nothing to do with American history. Because what you think is money is not American. It is a private corporation that's bleeding our nation. But the greatest economic growth in the history of this country was when these bankers did not have control of our issuance of currency. Understand that. From 1869 to 1879, the U.S. economy grew at a rate of about 6.8% of real GDP, gross domestic product, and about 4.5% for real GDP per capita, despite the Panic of 1873. Now, my friends, when you study the Panic of 1873, just like in 1904 and 1908, that was the bankers trying to create a panic so they can get a Federal Reserve Act in. You know, and if you look at the annual rate to the per capita, which means growth for the people, for you and I individually, it was 3.8%. 3.8%, almost 4%, never has taken place in the history of the world. The Federal Reserve, number two, the Federal Reserve is a perpetual debt machine. We have talked about this very much. My friends, it works this way. You're losing purchasing power because the more of these phony dollars that they have to produce, the less value they have, hence it takes more of them to buy the same loaf of bread. The idea that my mother could buy a house in 1964 for $14,000, which today costs $200,000, the house has not changed. What's changed is the power of the medium of exchange. And because there's less purchasing power in that medium of exchange, which you think is a dollar, which is not, but leave it what it is, it takes more of them because it holds less value. And as they produce 85 billion of these new ones every month, and by the way, the burden of that interest is on you, and that burden of that debt is on you. Yes. Folks, they got 28.3 trillion with a T dollars so to give to all their other crony banks throughout the country, throughout the world, with no accountability to the American people, and we have to pay them an interest bond due on every one of them because they gave us permission to print it and give it to them in the first place. Of course, they did it with the barrel of a gun. Do you remember Congressman Sherman coming out on the floor and saying, hey, you know, we were told that if we don't do this, the stock market will crash tomorrow. There will be domestic martial law. That was his own words. So guys, who's really in control here? Is it the puppets you're allowed to see, Obama, Congressman Sherman, and so forth? No. It's the people telling these puppets, hey, if you don't do this, this whole thing's going to collapse. We are going to collapse it. That's who's in charge. So when you get into this, you know, got to raise the debt ceiling, understand that's part of the dog and pony show for your entertainment. And isn't it amazing how it always seems to come through, huh? They always get us in more debt because debt is a tool. You enslave people with debt. You enslave them. John Adams, one illustrious quote when they were talking about at one of the constitutional conventions in Pennsylvania. There was two big things that took place for quotes. And one was John Adams saying that the most effective way to enslave a people is to enslave them through debt. And the other one was from Thomas Jefferson's letter to the convention, because they had sent him to France because they would have never got the Constitution passed. So the powers to be, particularly Alexander Hamilton, who was an agent for the Rothschild banking house, sent Jefferson to negotiate contract with France, particularly war reparations and so forth. And he said that, and he wrote a letter back and said that he believes that standing armies are more dangerous to our, that banking facilities, bankers are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. That if the American people ever allowed private banking corporations to issue the control of their currency, for the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them, first through a process and then of inflation and then deflation, the American people will wake up homeless on the continent their forefathers conquered. Do you think you own your land? Do you think you own your car? Do you think you're bonded with an instrument called the birth certificate? You go ahead and don't pay your extortion fee known as property taxes for a couple of years, and you're going to find out who really owns your land. Do you ever wonder why we used to have a allodial title in this country, and now all we have is certificate of title? Remember, our Black's Law Dictionary demonstrated allodial title was Latin for absolute. Absolute. You owned it. Certificate of title means bearer use of. Someone is allowing you to use something of value while maintaining possession of the value. That's why if you look at your license plate, I don't care what state you're from. I do not care. They all have it, commercial or private. You go down the license plate and right in the center, and you have to play with the sunlight or the light a little bit, but you'll see these little endorsements. They're stamped into the license plate. They don't want you to see them, so they're hidden in plain view. But if you play with your license plate enough with the light right in the center, you will see a series of circle stamps. They're called endorsements in law. And what that is, that's telling you who actually owns that entity. It's like you endorsing a check. They're endorsements. I show that to people all the time. All the time. My friends, I can tell you right now, I am not going to have the time to get into this article, so we will continue this next week. But while we're on the thought process of the Federal Reserve, and I know some of you have watched this program for years now, don't want to hear this again, but we have so many new viewers that sometimes we have to go back to the basics. And I compliment you, those of you who are beyond this, who understand the real war that's being waged against us. You know, folks, and when you wage war, what do? You control minds, you control currencies, you destroy infrastructure, you go after their energy-producing facilities, you go after their military, you go after their education, you go after their food supplies. When you're waging war. The Obama administration is shutting down coal plants, something like to the extent of 3 every month. They are controlling your food supply and poisoning it. And along with that goes your water. Look at fluoride. It's a hazardous material, and it's listed as such. And the back of your toothpaste tube, please read it. If it has fluoride, it'll say, if this product is swallowed, contact poison control. Why? Because you're ingesting a poison. The first people to put fluoride in the water, my friends, wasn't the United States. It was Lenin in the gulags. Stalin, in the gulags. The second person to do it was Hitler in the labor camps, or you know them as concentration camps, because he saw the effect it had on the people with the Soviets. Now the Americans are doing it to you. They are attacking your money supply. That's how the South lost the war. When the Rothschilds financed the North through the House of Rothschild out of London, James out of Paris, the South, Hampshire, the North, and all they had to do, my friends, was pull the credit on the South. Hyperinflation took place in the South. They couldn't buy anything, even though they were militarily slapping the North around. The education system. We are now the top 36 industrial nations. I don't even consider ourselves an industrial nation anymore, but are the top 36, we're ranked 28. Newspapers in this country have they keep their reading at a 4th grade reading level because that's where the average high school student is when they graduate public school now from 1964 when the feds took education over. Your infrastructure in this country is completely falling apart and it's being bought out by foreign corporations. So, is there a war being waged against the American people? We have read this to you verbatim, 1933 Trading with the Enemies Act, where the United States government declared you the enemy. And now, with the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, they declared the United States a battleground. So ask yourself, be objective. How did we defeat enemies in Iraq and or Germany or wherever, supposed enemies? We were profiteering for the bankers. You bleed, they profit. But how do we do it? We went after all the things that I just mentioned that are being destroyed here in this country. My friends, we can have effect, but you have got to educate yourselves. You've got to get active. You've got to stay in the understanding that you have been declared the enemy through the 1933 Trading with the Enemies Act. Your homeland has been declared a battleground with the NDAA 2012. And they are gearing up for that. FEMA camps, internment camps, NRAPs, 2.3 billion rounds of ammo. Anyway, my friends, we will get into this next week. I have to close due for the sake of time. As always, we are very thankful you take the time from your busy day to watch our program. And as always, we close reminding you that your government is your responsibility. Thank you for watching.
Got to read between the lines. Got to read